In 1998, newlyweds Olivia and Marcus Trent kissed their families goodbye and drove away from their Phoenix wedding reception, headed for the airport and a dream honeymoon in Hawaii. They never arrived. For 25 years, their families searched for answers, clinging to hope that grew thinner with each passing season. But when a construction crew breaks ground on a new highway expansion in the Arizona desert, they unearth something that transforms a cold case into a living nightmare. What they discover will reveal that some secrets don't stay buried forever, and the truth about that wedding night is far more sinister than anyone imagined. If you're fascinated by real mysteries and true crime stories that defy explanation, subscribe and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss what happens next. The desert sun beat down mercilessly on the construction site 20 miles outside Phoenix. Dust clouds rose from heavy machinery as workers prepared to lay the foundation for a new highway expansion that would cut through miles of previously untouched desert landscape. Tommy Reeves wiped the sweat from his brow and climbed down from his excavator, frowning at an unusual resistance he'd felt in the earth. He'd been doing this work for 15 years and knew the difference between rock, compacted soil, and something that didn't belong. "Hey, Gutierrez," he called to his supervisor, who was reviewing blueprints nearby. "Got something weird here." Frank Gutierrez looked up from his papers and walked over, his boots crunching on the dry ground. Tommy pointed to a section of disturbed earth where the excavator had scraped away several feet of desert floor. "What am I looking at?" Frank asked, squinting in the bright light. "That's what I want to know." Partially exposed in the excavated area was what appeared to be the roof of a vehicle, its paint faded and covered in a quarter-century of desert dust and debris. But it was the deliberate way the earth had been mounded over it that caught Frank's attention. This wasn't a car that had been abandoned or left to rust. This was a car that had been buried. Frank pulled out his phone, his expression grim. "Nobody touch anything else. I'm calling the police." Within 2 hours, the construction site had been transformed into a crime scene. Yellow tape cordoned off the area while officers and forensic technicians carefully excavated around the vehicle. News helicopters circled overhead, their cameras transmitting live footage to every major station in Phoenix. Detective Ray Cordero stood at the edge of the excavation, watching as his team worked to expose the vehicle. It was a white sedan, a late 1990s model. As they cleared more dirt away, he could make out the license plate, still partially visible despite years of deterioration. A young officer approached him with a tablet. "Detective, I ran the plate. Vehicles registered to a Marcus Trent, reported missing in September 1998. Cordero's jaw tightened. He'd been with the Phoenix Police Department for 30 years, and he remembered that case. Everyone did. The newlyweds who'd vanished on their wedding night, driving to the airport for their honeymoon. It had been one of those cases that haunted a community, that appeared on anniversary news segments every few years, gradually fading from public consciousness as hope dimmed. "Get me everything we have on that case," Cordero said quietly, "and find out if any family members are still in the area. They deserve to know before this hits the evening news." As forensic technicians carefully opened the trunk of the buried vehicle, Cordero turned away, already dreading what they might find inside. After 25 years, the desert was finally giving up its secrets, but he suspected that what they were about to discover would raise more questions than it answered. Harper Whitmore stood in her kitchen in Scottsdale, preparing dinner for her teenage daughter, when her phone rang. She didn't recognize the number, but something about the Phoenix area code made her stomach tighten with old, familiar dread. "Hello, Ms. Whitmore. This is Detective Ray Cordero with the Phoenix Police Department. I'm calling about your sister, Olivia Trent." The knife Harper had been holding clattered to the cutting board. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. It had been 25 years since anyone had called her about Olivia. 25 years since her sister and new brother-in-law had driven away from the Phoenician resort, where 200 guests had celebrated their marriage, and simply disappeared into the night. "You found something," Harper said, her voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't a question. "Yes, ma'am. I'd prefer to discuss this in person." Would it be possible for you to come to the station, and I'll need to contact your mother as well? Harper's hand found the edge of the counter for support. My mother passed away 3 years ago. Heart attack. I'm very sorry. Detective, please, just tell me. Did you find my sister? There was a long pause on the other end of the line. We've located the vehicle they were driving. A construction crew discovered it this morning, buried in the desert off Route 87. We're in the process of processing the scene now. And Olivia. Marcus. Ms. Whitmore, I really think it would be better if you came to the station. Is there someone who can drive you? Harper closed her eyes, understanding what he wasn't saying. After a quarter-century, her sister was never coming home. She'd known it, of course. Everyone had known it after the first few months, then the first few years. But knowing and having it confirmed were two different things entirely. I'll be there in an hour, she said, and ended the call. Her daughter, Brianna, appeared in the doorway, her face creased with concern. Mom, what's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost. Harper turned to face her 17-year-old, this child who had never known her Aunt Olivia, who had only heard the stories, seen the old photographs that Harper kept in albums she couldn't bear to look at, but couldn't bear to put away. They found Aunt Olivia's car, Harper said, her voice sounding strange and distant to her own ears. I need to go to the police station. Brianna crossed the kitchen and wrapped her arms around her mother. I'm coming with you. The Phoenix Police Department's headquarters was downtown, and the drive gave Harper too much time to think, to remember. She kept seeing Olivia in her wedding dress, radiant and laughing, her dark hair swept up in an elegant twist, her eyes shining with joy as she'd hugged Harper goodbye. Take care of Mom for me, Olivia had whispered in her ear, both of them knowing their mother had taken the divorce hard and was drinking too much. I'll call you from Maui. But the call had never come. Detective Cordero met them in the lobby, a tall man in his mid-50s with gray threading through his dark hair and kind eyes that had seen too much. He led them to a small conference room and waited until they were seated before he began. Ms. Whitmore, what I'm about to tell you is difficult. The vehicle we found was deliberately buried in a remote location approximately 20 miles from where your sister and brother-in-law were last seen. Based on the depth and method of burial, we believe this was done shortly after their disappearance. Harper's hands were shaking. Brianna reached over and took one, squeezing tightly. Did you find them? Harper asked. Did you find their bodies? Cordero's expression was carefully controlled. We found human remains in the trunk of the vehicle. 2 individuals. We'll need dental records to confirm identification, but based on the circumstances and the location, we have every reason to believe these are Olivia and Marcus Trent. The room seemed to tilt. Harper heard herself make a sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Brianna's grip on her hand tightened. How did they die? Harper managed to ask. Was it an accident? A carjacking? The medical examiner is still conducting the autopsy, but I can tell you that this was not an accident. Both victims show signs of trauma consistent with homicide. We're treating this as a double murder investigation. Murder. The word hung in the air like a physical presence. All these years, Harper had imagined scenarios. Car accident in the desert, bodies never found. Kidnapping gone wrong. Even in her darkest moments, the possibility that Olivia and Marcus had staged their own disappearance, though she'd never truly believed that. But murder, cold and deliberate. Their bodies hidden away like garbage in the trunk of their own car. I need you to understand something, Cordero continued, leaning forward. This case is 25 years old, but the fact that the bodies were buried, that someone took the time and effort to hide them so thoroughly, tells us this wasn't random. Someone knew them. Someone had a reason. Harper looked up at him, her vision blurred with tears. You think you can find who did this after all this time? I'm going to try, but I need your help. I need you to tell me everything you remember about that night, about the days leading up to the wedding, about anyone who might have had a reason to hurt your sister or Marcus. Harper wiped her eyes, trying to steady herself. She'd been 19 when Olivia disappeared, just starting college. Her whole life ahead of her. Now she was 44, with a daughter of her own, and her sister would be forever frozen at 23. Olivia and Marcus were perfect together, Harper began, her voice gaining strength as she spoke. They met at Arizona State, both graduating the year before. Marcus was getting his MBA. Olivia was teaching second grade. Everyone loved them. Their wedding was beautiful, no drama, no problems. They were supposed to catch a red-eye flight to Honolulu at midnight. The reception ended around 10. They left in Marcus's car, headed for the airport. "What time did the reception end exactly?" Cordero asked, taking notes. "Around 9:45, I think." Olivia changed out of her wedding dress into travel clothes. They said goodbye to everyone, got in the car, and drove away. That's the last time anyone saw them. "When did you realize something was wrong?" Harper closed her eyes, remembering. "Mom called me the next afternoon. She'd been trying to reach Olivia all day. They were supposed to call when they landed in Maui. When they didn't, Mom called the hotel, called the airline. They'd never checked in for their flight. That's when we called the police." "And the investigation at the time?" "They searched everywhere. The route from the Phoenician to Sky Harbor Airport is pretty straightforward. Police checked every inch of it, questioned everyone at the wedding. Marcus's car was gone. Their luggage was gone. Their honeymoon tickets were never used. It was like they vanished into thin air." Cordero nodded slowly. "I've pulled the original case files. I'll be reviewing everything. But I want you to think back, Ms. Whitmore. Was there anyone who seemed upset at the wedding? Anyone who had a problem with the marriage? An ex-boyfriend? Someone who might have been jealous?" Harper thought for a long moment. "Olivia dated someone in college before Marcus. Ryan something. Ryan Hollis, I think. They broke up maybe 6 months before she met Marcus. It wasn't a good breakup. He called her a lot. Showed up at her apartment. But that was 2 years before the wedding. I don't think he even came to the ceremony." Cordero made a note. "Anyone else?" "Marcus had a business partner. They'd started a software company together right after graduation. Olivia mentioned once that there was some tension there, something about money or ownership shares. But I don't remember the details. I was 19 and wrapped up in my own life." "Do you remember the partner's name?" "Cole. Cole Brennan, I think." As Cordero continued his questions, Harper felt something shifting inside her. The dull ache of grief she'd carried for 25 years was sharpening into something else. Anger, determination. Her sister's body had been found, but whoever had put her in that trunk, whoever had stolen her future, was still out there, still living, breathing, maybe even thinking they'd gotten away with it. But now the desert had given up its secret, and Harper was going to make sure that whoever had killed her sister finally faced justice. The Phoenix Police Department's Cold Case Division occupied a floor in the headquarters building that felt forgotten by time. Boxes of old files lined the walls, and the fluorescent lights hummed with a persistent, irritating frequency. Detective Ray Cordero sat at his desk the morning after meeting with Harper Whitmore, surrounded by everything the department had on the Trent case. The original investigation had been thorough. He had to give them that. Missing person reports filed within 24 hours. Searches conducted along every possible route between the Phoenician Resort and Sky Harbor Airport. Interviews with wedding guests, family members, friends, co-workers, phone records subpoenaed and analyzed, financial records checked for any unusual activity. And yet, nothing. The Newlyweds had simply vanished, and the case had eventually gone cold, filed away with hundreds of others that haunted the department's archives. Cordero spread out crime scene photos from yesterday's excavation across his desk. The white sedan had been buried nose down in a shallow ravine, then covered with displaced earth and desert brush. Whoever had done it knew the area well enough to choose a spot that wouldn't be disturbed. At least, not for 25 years. His phone rang, and he picked up immediately. "Cordero." "Detective, this is Dr. Sarah Chen from the medical examiner's office. I've completed the preliminary examination of the remains from the Trent case." Cordero grabbed his pen. "What can you tell me?" "Both victims died from gunshot wounds to the head, execution style. Small caliber, likely a .22. Based on the positioning of the bodies and the blood spatter patterns inside the trunk, they were shot somewhere else and placed in the vehicle post-mortem. So they were killed and then transported to the burial site. Correct. I found fibers on the female victim's clothing that don't match anything from the vehicle interior. They appear to be from industrial carpeting, possibly from a warehouse or commercial space. I've sent samples to the lab for analysis. Time of death. Given the state of decomposition and the environmental factors, I'd estimate within 24 hours of their reported disappearance. Dental records confirm the identities as Olivia and Marcus Trent. Cordero thanked her and ended the call, his mind already working through the implications. Execution-style killing suggested this wasn't a crime of passion or a random act of violence. Someone had planned this. Someone had lured or forced the newlyweds to a secondary location, killed them, and then carefully disposed of the bodies. A knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. Officer Jennifer Park, one of the department's brightest young detectives, poked her head in. "Got a minute? I've been running down the names from the original investigation." "Come in. What did you find?" Park entered, carrying a laptop and a thick folder. "I started with the ex-boyfriend Harper Whitmore mentioned, Ryan Hollis. He's clean, at least on paper. No criminal record beyond a DUI in college. He's a dentist now, married with 3 kids, lives in Tempe." Where was he the night of the disappearance? According to his statement from 1998, he was at home with his parents in Flagstaff. They confirmed it at the time. But here's what's interesting. Park opened her laptop and turned it to face Cordero. "I pulled his financial records from around that time. 2 weeks before the wedding, Hollis withdrew $15,000 in cash from his savings account." Cordero's eyebrows rose. "That's a lot of cash." Gets better. The day after Olivia and Marcus disappeared, he deposited $10,000 back into his account. No explanation for either transaction. Could be nothing. Maybe he was buying a car, changed his mind. Maybe. But I think it's worth bringing him in for a conversation. Cordero nodded. "What about the business partner?" "Cole Brennan." Park's expression darkened. Now that's where things get interesting. Brennan and Marcus Trent started a software company called DataSync Solutions in 1996. According to incorporation documents, they were 50-50 partners. But 6 months before the wedding, Marcus filed paperwork to dissolve the partnership. Why? The original investigators didn't dig too deep into that, but I made some calls. Turns out Marcus had discovered that Brennan was embezzling from the company, approximately $200,000 over the course of a year. Marcus was planning to file criminal charges right after the honeymoon. Cordero leaned back in his chair, pieces clicking into place. So Brennan had motive. Did anyone question him at the time? Briefly. He claimed he was at a business conference in San Diego the night of the disappearance. The hotel confirmed he'd checked in, but that doesn't mean he couldn't have driven back to Phoenix, a 5-hour trip. Where is Brennan now? Park smiled grimly. That's the thing. He's still here in Phoenix, still running DataSync Solutions. Turns out, when Marcus disappeared, Brennan got full control of the company. He filed papers declaring Marcus legally dead after 7 years and assumed complete ownership. The company's worth about $40 million now. Cordero whistled low. So he had $200,000 in motive then, and a $40 million payoff later. Exactly. And there's one more thing. Park pulled out a photograph from her folder. This is Cole Brennan in 1998. Cordero studied the image. A young man in his 20s, dark hair, confident smile, standing in front of a building with a DataSync Solutions sign. Now look at this. Park placed another photo beside it. This is from the company's current website. The Cole Brennan in the second photo was older, grayer, but unmistakably the same person. Except now he wore expensive suits, drove a Porsche according to his social media, and lived in a Paradise Valley mansion. A man who built an empire on his partner's grave, Cordero said quietly. Let's bring him in, and get me everything you can find on his whereabouts the week of the wedding. Phone records, credit card statements, witness statements. If he was anywhere near Phoenix that night, I want to know about it. As Park left to begin coordinating interviews, Cordero turned back to the crime scene photos. The image of the buried car haunted him. Someone had taken the time to dig a grave large enough for an entire vehicle, had transported 2 bodies to this remote location, had carefully hidden their crime under tons of desert earth. This wasn't the work of an amateur. This was someone who knew what they were doing, someone who thought they could get away with murder. And for 25 years, they had. But Detective Cordero had learned long ago that time had a way of unraveling even the most carefully constructed lies. People talked, relationships ended, consciences festered. And sometimes, the earth itself refused to keep secrets forever. He picked up his phone and dialed Harper Whitmore's number. She answered on the first ring. "Ms. Whitmore, this is Detective Cordero. I have some questions about your sister's husband. Did Marcus ever mention feeling threatened by his business partner?" There was a pause, and he could hear Harper thinking, reaching back through decades of memory. "Olivia said something once. It was maybe a month before the wedding. She said Marcus was stressed about the business, that Cole had done something that really upset him. But Marcus didn't want to ruin the wedding by dealing with it, so he was going to handle it when they got back from the honeymoon." "Did she say what Cole had done?" "No, just that Marcus had found some irregularities in the company accounts. I remember because Olivia joked that Cole was probably buying too many expensive dinners on the company card." Cordero thanked her and ended the call. Embezzlement wasn't funny money for expensive dinners. $200,000 was serious crime, the kind that could send someone to prison, the kind that might make someone desperate enough to kill. He stood and grabbed his jacket. It was time to have a conversation with Cole Brennan, the man who'd built a fortune on his missing partner's company, the man who'd had every reason to want Marcus Trent dead, and who'd conveniently been out of town when it happened. Or so he claimed. Cole Brennan's office occupied the top floor of a gleaming glass building in North Scottsdale, with panoramic views of the desert mountains that surrounded the valley. The reception area was all modern minimalism, chrome and leather and abstract art that probably cost more than most people's cars. Detective Cordero and Officer Park were kept waiting for 20 minutes before Brennan's assistant, a severe-looking woman in her 40s, finally led them down a hallway lined with photos chronicling DataSync Solutions' success. Cordero noted that none of the photos included Marcus Trent, as if the company's co-founder had been erased from its history. Cole Brennan stood when they entered, extending his hand with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to projecting confidence. He was 50 now, his dark hair silvering at the temples, his suit clearly bespoke. Everything about him spoke of success, of a man who'd built something substantial. "Detectives, please sit. My assistant said this was about Marcus Trent. I assume this is related to the news about the car they found." Cordero settled into the chair across from Brennan's massive desk, studying the man's face for any sign of nervousness. He saw none, only a careful, professional concern. "Thank you for meeting with us, Mr. Brennan. Yes, we're reinvestigating the disappearance and deaths of Marcus and Olivia Trent. I understand you and Marcus were business partners." "We were, yes. 25 years ago." Brennan leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Marcus's disappearance was devastating. Not just personally, but for the company. We were just getting off the ground, and suddenly I was trying to run everything alone while not knowing if my partner was coming back." "When did you last see Marcus?" Park asked, her pen poised over her notepad. "The wedding reception. I was there, along with probably 200 other people. Beautiful ceremony. Olivia looked radiant." His voice carried just the right note of nostalgia and sadness. "And after they left the reception, I stayed for another hour or so, then drove home. I had an early flight the next morning to San Diego for a conference." Cordero nodded slowly. "Tell me about your relationship with Marcus in the months leading up to the wedding. How was the business doing?" For the first time, something flickered across Brennan's face. Just for a moment, his jaw tightened. The business was doing well. We had some disagreements about direction, as partners do, but nothing serious. "Nothing serious," Cordero repeated. "So Marcus didn't confront you about financial irregularities?" Brennan's expression remained neutral, but Cordero noticed his hands had moved from their steepled position to grip the arms of his chair. "I'm not sure what you mean. Mr. Brennan, we have documents showing that Marcus was planning to dissolve the partnership, that he discovered approximately $200,000 missing from company accounts." The silence that followed stretched long enough to become uncomfortable. Brennan stood and walked to the window, his back to them, looking out over the desert landscape that had swallowed his partner's body for a quarter-century. "That's ancient history, Detective. And yes, there was a misunderstanding about how certain funds were allocated. Marcus and I had different ideas about how to invest in the company's growth. I took some liberties that in hindsight I shouldn't have, but we were working it out." "Were you?" Park's voice carried a sharp edge. "Because the paperwork Marcus filed suggests he was planning to press criminal charges." Brennan turned back to face them, and now his carefully constructed facade showed cracks. "Look, I was young and stupid. I made some bad financial decisions, but Marcus and I talked about it the week before the wedding. We agreed to bring in an accountant, sort everything out properly after the honeymoon. There was no reason for criminal charges." "Convenient that he disappeared before he could file them," Cordero observed. Brennan's face flushed with anger. "Are you suggesting I had something to do with what happened to Marcus? I was in San Diego that night. I have receipts, witness statements, everything was checked at the time." "You checked into a hotel in San Diego at 8 p.m., Park said, consulting her notes from the original investigation. "The Trents left their reception at 9:45 p.m. Phoenix time. That's a 5-hour drive. You could have driven back, been in Phoenix by 3 a.m., and been back in San Diego by morning." "That's insane. Why would I risk everything for something like that? $200,000 in embezzlement charges," Cordero said quietly. "That's 5 to 10 years in prison. And if Marcus dissolved the partnership, you'd lose your share of a company you'd helped build. Those sound like pretty compelling reasons to me." Brennan returned to his desk, sitting heavily. For a long moment, he stared at his hands. When he spoke again, his voice was different, less controlled. "I loved Marcus like a brother. Yes, we had problems. Yes, I did things I'm not proud of, but I didn't hurt him. I didn't hurt Olivia. And I've spent 25 years wishing I could go back and fix the mistakes I made." "Tell us about the money," Cordero said. "What did you use it for?" "I had a gambling problem. Nothing huge, nothing that couldn't be managed, but I was making bad bets, losing more than I should. I thought I could pay it back before Marcus noticed. I was wrong. Who did you owe money to?" Brennan looked up sharply. "What? You said you had gambling debts. Who did you owe money to in 1998? A pause, then. "Private games, mostly. High-stakes poker. There was a man who ran them, Victor Salazar. But I paid him back. Eventually." Cordero exchanged a glance with Park. Victor Salazar's name appeared in several organized crime investigations from that era. Nothing had ever stuck, but the man had connections to people who made problems disappear. "Did Salazar know about your problems with Marcus?" Cordero asked. "I might have mentioned it. Look, Victor was just a guy who ran card games. He wasn't some mob boss. Mr. Brennan, Victor Salazar was investigated for racketeering and suspected involvement in 3 homicides. He wasn't just some guy." The color drained from Brennan's face. "I didn't know that. Not at the time. I just thought he was a businessman who liked poker." "Did you ever discuss Marcus with him? Did you tell him Marcus was planning to file charges against you?" "I don't remember. Maybe. I was drinking a lot back then, stressed about everything. But I never asked him to do anything. I never wanted Marcus hurt." Cordero stood, followed by Park. "We'll need you to come to the station and make a formal statement, and we'll need a list of everyone who attended those poker games." "Am I under arrest?" "Not yet, but I'd strongly suggest you cooperate fully with this investigation, Mr. Brennan, because right now, you're the only person we know of who had both motive and opportunity to kill Marcus Trent, and you built a $40 million empire on his grave." As they walked back through the reception area, Cordero's phone buzzed with a text from the forensics lab. He read it, then stopped in his tracks. "What is it?" Park asked. The fibers Dr. Chen found on Olivia's clothing. They just identified them. Industrial carpeting, exactly the type used in commercial warehouses in the late 1990s. He showed her the attached photo. DataSync Solutions operated out of a warehouse in Tempe until 2003. Park's eyes widened. We need to get a warrant for that property. Already on it, but there's more. The lab found traces of gunpowder residue on Marcus's clothes. They're running ballistics now, but they said the weapon was likely a .22 caliber, probably a pistol. Brennan owned a gun? Let's find out. Back in Brennan's office, Cole Brennan stood at his window, watching the detective's car pull away from the building. His hands were shaking as he pulled out his phone and dialed a number he hadn't called in over a decade. "Victor, it's Cole. We need to talk. The police just left my office. They're asking about Marcus Trent." The voice on the other end was smooth, untroubled. After 25 years? What could they possibly have found? "They found the bodies, the car, everything." There was a long pause. "That's unfortunate. What did you tell them?" "Nothing. I admitted to the embezzlement, but I didn't say anything about you. About what really happened that night." "Good. Keep it that way. The past should stay buried, Cole, for everyone's sake." "But what if they start digging deeper? What if they find the warehouse, find evidence?" "There is no evidence. We made sure of that. Just keep your mouth shut and let your lawyer handle it. You're a successful businessman now. They have nothing concrete. They mentioned your name. They know about the poker games." Another pause, longer this time. "Then perhaps it's time for you to take a vacation, Cole. Somewhere far from Phoenix. At least until this blows over. I can't just leave. That would look guilty. And staying while they build a case against you looks smarter. Think about what you have to lose. Think about your company, your reputation, your freedom. A few weeks out of the country while your lawyers handle this investigation seems like a small price to pay." Cole closed his eyes, gripping the phone tightly. He'd spent 25 years trying to forget that night, trying to bury the memory as deeply as they'd buried Marcus's car. But the desert had given up its dead, and now the carefully constructed life he'd built was beginning to crumble. "I'll think about it," he said finally. "Don't think too long, my friend. The walls are closing in, and when they do, everyone looks for someone to blame. Make sure that someone isn't you." The line went dead, leaving Cole Brennan alone in his expensive office, staring out at a view he'd paid for with blood money. Ryan Hollis's dental practice occupied a modest building in downtown Tempe, wedged between a coffee shop and a yoga studio. The waiting room smelled of antiseptic and mint, decorated with watercolors of Arizona landscapes and several photos of Hollis with his family, all smiles and coordinated outfits. Detective Cordero and Officer Park had called ahead, requesting a meeting, but Hollis's receptionist informed them he was with a patient. They waited, watching as people came and went, until finally a nurse led them back to Hollis's private office. Ryan Hollis was a slight man, shorter than Cordero had expected, with thinning sandy hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He looked nervous as they entered, standing to shake their hands with a grip that was too firm, overcompensating. "Detectives, please sit. I have to admit, I was surprised to get your call. I haven't thought about Olivia in years." Cordero settled into the chair across from Hollis's desk, noting the family photos prominently displayed. A wife, 3 children, all featuring Hollis in various vacation settings. The picture of a normal, successful life. "Mr. Hollis, we're reinvestigating the disappearance of Olivia and Marcus Trent. As you've probably seen on the news, we've recovered their vehicle and remains." Hollis nodded, his face somber. "Terrible. Just terrible. Olivia was a wonderful person. We dated for almost 2 years in college. I was devastated when I heard she'd disappeared." "Tell us about your relationship with her," Park said. According to several witnesses from that time, the breakup was difficult. A flush crept up Hollis's neck. "We were young. I handled it badly. I probably called her too many times, showed up when I shouldn't have. But that was 6 months before she even met Marcus. By the time they got married, I'd moved on. Had you? Cordero asked. Because according to phone records from 1998, you called Olivia's apartment 17 times in the week before her wedding. Hollis's face paled. I was trying to apologize, to make peace before she started her new life. The calls were never answered. I never spoke to her. Where were you the night of September 19th, 1998? I was in Flagstaff with my parents. My father had just been diagnosed with cancer. I drove up that Friday and stayed the weekend. My mother and father both confirmed that at the time. And yet, Park said, pulling out a document, we have toll records showing your car passed through the Flagstaff Toll Plaza, heading south at 8:30 p.m. that night and heading north again at 4:15 a.m. the following morning. The color drained completely from Hollis's face. He opened his mouth, closed it, then opened it again. I don't understand. That's not possible. Isn't it? Your parents confirmed you were there, but elderly parents might not notice if their adult son slipped out late at night. The timing works perfectly. You could have driven to Phoenix, intercepted Olivia and Marcus on their way to the airport, and been back before morning. No, that's insane. I would never hurt Olivia. I loved her. Then explain the $15,000 you withdrew 2 weeks before her wedding, Cordero said, watching Hollis's reaction carefully. And the $10,000 you deposited the day after she disappeared. Hollis stood abruptly, his chair rolling back and hitting the wall. I need to call my lawyer. That's your right, Cordero said calmly. But let me tell you what I think happened. I think you couldn't accept that Olivia had moved on. I think you watched her fall in love with someone else, watched her plan a wedding, watched her slip away from you. And something in you snapped. That's not true. I think you followed them that night. Maybe you just wanted to talk to her one last time, convince her she was making a mistake. But things went wrong. Maybe Marcus confronted you. Maybe there was a fight. Stop. You had a gun. Maybe you didn't plan to use it, but in the heat of the moment, you made a choice. And then you had to hide what you'd done. Stop it! Hollis's voice cracked. I didn't kill anyone. I was in Flagstaff. The money, the toll records, none of that means anything. Then explain it, Park said quietly. Help us understand. Hollis sank back into his chair, his hands shaking. For a long moment, he stared at his desk, at the photos of his family, at the life he'd built. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. I did drive to Phoenix that night, but not to see Olivia. I went to see a woman I'd been having an affair with. Her name was Jessica. She lived in Scottsdale. Cordero and Park exchanged glances. You're married? I wasn't then, but I was engaged. My fiancée. She's my wife now. She had no idea. I used the excuse of being in Flagstaff to slip away. The money I withdrew was to pay for the apartment I'd rented for Jessica. The money I deposited was what was left after I broke things off with her that night. We'll need Jessica's full name and contact information, Park said. She's married now, too. She has kids. I haven't spoken to her in 20 years. Mr. Hollis, if your alibi is legitimate, we need to verify it. Otherwise, you remain a suspect in a double homicide. Hollis pulled out a pen with trembling hands and wrote down a name and last known address on a notepad. Jessica Moreno. She lived on Hayden Road. I don't know where she is now. As Cordero took the paper, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then stood. We'll need you to come to the station tomorrow to make a formal statement. And don't leave town, Mr. Hollis. Outside, in the parking lot, Park turned to Cordero. You believe him? About the affair? Maybe, but even if he was with this Jessica woman, the timing still works. He could have met her, left, intercepted the Trents, and then gone back to Flagstaff. We need to find Jessica Moreno and see if her story matches his. What was the text? Cordero showed her his phone. Warrant came through for the old DataSync warehouse. Forensics team is heading there now. The warehouse sat in an industrial area of Tempe that had seen better days. Many of the surrounding buildings were vacant, their windows broken, their parking lots cracked and overgrown with desert weeds. The DataSync building itself had been sold years ago, converted into storage units. Cordero and Park met the forensics team outside. Dr. Sarah Chen, the medical examiner, was already there, along with 2 technicians carrying equipment designed to detect trace evidence that might have survived 2.5 decades. "We're looking for blood spatter, ballistic evidence, anything that suggests violence occurred here," Chen explained as they entered the building. "The carpet's long gone, but if they killed the Trents here, there might be traces in the concrete beneath, especially if the bodies were left for any period of time." They worked methodically, the technicians spraying luminol in sections, photographing any areas that showed fluorescence. Hours passed. The sun set, darkness falling over the industrial park, and still they found nothing. Cordero was beginning to think they were wrong about the location when one of the technicians called out from a corner of the warehouse that had once been partitioned off as an office space. "Detective, you need to see this." The luminol had revealed a pattern on the concrete floor, glowing an eerie blue-green under the UV light. Not just spatter, but a large pool, and drag marks leading toward what had been a loading dock. "That's a lot of blood," Chen said quietly, consistent with 2 victims bleeding out. "The drag marks suggest they were moved after death, probably loaded into a vehicle." "Can you tell how old it is?" Park asked. "Luminol reacts to blood regardless of age, but given the location, the pattern, and the amount, I'd say this matches our timeline. We'll need to do further testing, try to extract DNA if any survived, but this looks like our primary crime scene." Cordero stood in the warehouse, imagining what had happened here 25 years ago. Olivia and Marcus, newly married, hours away from starting their honeymoon. Someone had lured them here, or forced them. Someone had executed them in this cold, empty space, then loaded their bodies into the trunk of their own car. "Bag everything," he said. "Every sample, every fiber. Someone murdered them here, and if there's even a trace of evidence left, I want it found." As the forensics team worked through the night, Cordero stepped outside and called Harper Whitmore. She deserved to know what they'd discovered. She answered immediately. "Detective?" "Ms. Whitmore, we've located what we believe is the primary crime scene, the warehouse where DataSync Solutions operated in 1998. We're processing it now." There was a long silence. Then, "Cole Brennan's warehouse?" "Yes. He killed my sister. He killed them both, and then he took everything Marcus had built." "My God." "We don't have enough evidence yet to make an arrest, but we're getting closer. I promise you, we're going to find out exactly what happened that night." After ending the call, Cordero looked up at the stars visible above the warehouse, the same stars that had watched over this building the night Olivia and Marcus Trent took their last breaths. The same stars that had seen their killer walk away free. But not anymore. The evidence was there, buried in concrete and time, and Detective Cordero was going to bring it into the light. The DNA results from the warehouse came back 3 days later. Detective Cordero sat in his office, reading the report with growing certainty. The blood found in the old DataSync warehouse matched both Olivia and Marcus Trent. But there was something else, something that changed everything. A third DNA profile, degraded but still identifiable, extracted from skin cells found mixed with the blood evidence. The profile belonged to someone who'd been in direct contact with the victims at the time of their deaths. Cordero immediately ran the profile through every database available. No match in CODIS, the National Criminal Database. No match in Arizona's state records. Whoever had killed the Trents had never been arrested, never been fingerprinted, never left their DNA in any official system. But that didn't mean the profile was useless. It meant they needed to get DNA from their suspects. Officer Park knocked on his door, entering with her laptop. "I found Jessica Moreno. She's Jessica Vance now, lives in Gilbert with her husband and 2 kids. I spoke to her on the phone. And?" She confirmed Ryan Hollis's story. Says he came to her apartment the night of September 19th, 1998, around 10:30 p.m. and stayed until almost 4 a.m. They broke up that night. She was pretty upset when I called. Said her husband doesn't know about the affair and she'd appreciate us being discreet. Cordero leaned back in his chair. "So Hollis's alibi checks out. He couldn't have been at the warehouse." Looks that way, but I did find something interesting about his financial records. Park turned her laptop to show him. The $15,000 he withdrew? It wasn't just for the apartment. He also made a payment to someone named Victor Salazar. Cordero sat up straighter. Salazar, the same man Brennan owed gambling debts to. Exactly, $5,000, paid in cash according to Hollis's records, 2 weeks before the wedding. What was Hollis doing paying money to a man connected to organized crime? I asked him that this morning. He claims he attended a few poker games, lost some money, paid it back. Says he didn't know who Salazar really was. Cordero stood and grabbed his jacket. It's time we had a conversation with Victor Salazar. Where is he now? That's the thing. He's completely legitimate these days. Owns a chain of car dealerships across the valley, does charity work, sits on the board of a children's hospital. If he was ever connected to organized crime, he's cleaned up his act remarkably well. Or he's just better at hiding it. Set up a meeting. I want to talk to him today. Victor Salazar's flagship dealership sprawled across several acres in central Phoenix, gleaming rows of luxury vehicles arranged under colorful banners advertising special financing. The showroom was all glass and marble, and Salazar's office was on the second floor, overlooking his automotive empire. The man himself was in his late 60s, silver-haired and distinguished, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Cordero's monthly salary. He stood when they entered, his handshake firm, his smile professionally warm. Detectives, please, have a seat. My secretary said this was about the Trent case. Terrible thing, just terrible. I've been following it on the news. Mr. Salazar, we understand you ran high-stakes poker games in the late 1990s. Cordero began, watching the man's face carefully. Salazar's smile didn't waver. That was a lifetime ago, detective. I made some poor choices in my youth. I've spent the last 20 years building legitimate businesses and giving back to the community. We're not here to discuss your past business ventures. We're investigating a double homicide. 2 people who knew you, who owed you money, died the night of September 19th, 1998. I knew a lot of people, detective, and many of them owed me money at various times. That's the nature of gambling. But I never hurt anyone over debts. That would be bad for business. Cole Brennan owed you approximately $50,000 in gambling debts, Park said. Ryan Hollis owed you $5,000. Both men had connections to the victims. If they owed me money, they paid it back. I have records, all perfectly legal now since I'm no longer in that business, but I can assure you, I had nothing to do with any murders. Cordero pulled out a photograph of Marcus and Olivia Trent, taken at their wedding. Do you recognize these people? Salazar studied the photo for a long moment, something unreadable flickering across his face. I've seen their pictures on the news, but I didn't know them personally. Cole Brennan never mentioned them to you? Never discussed his business partner who was planning to file embezzlement charges? Cole discussed a lot of things when he was drinking and losing at poker. I didn't pay much attention to most of it. What about the night of September 19th, 1998? Where were you? Salazar leaned back in his chair, his expression unchanging. Detective, that was 25 years ago. I have no idea where I was on any specific night from that time period. Let me refresh your memory. That was the night a poker game was held at the DataSync warehouse in Tempe, Cole Brennan's warehouse. Multiple witnesses have confirmed that you were there. For the first time, Salazar's composure slipped slightly. His eyes narrowed. Who told you that? Does it matter? Were you there or not? Salazar was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming on his desk. I may have attended a game there. It was a convenient location and Cole offered it when his home wasn't available. But that doesn't mean I had anything to do with what happened to those people. Who else was at that game? I don't remember. It was 25 years ago. Mr. Salazar, Cordero said, leaning forward. We have physical evidence from that warehouse, DNA evidence, and we're going to be requesting samples from everyone who had access to that location the night of the murders. I'm sure you understand that refusing to cooperate would look very suspicious. Salazar's jaw tightened. I'll need to speak with my attorney before I agree to any DNA testing. That's your right, but I should tell you that we've already obtained samples from Cole Brennan and Ryan Hollis. If your DNA matches what we found at the scene, no amount of legitimate business success is going to protect you. After they left Salazar's office, Park turned to Cordero in the parking lot. He's lying about something. Did you see his face when you showed him the photo? He recognized them. I'm sure of it. But recognizing someone's photo from the news isn't the same as proving he killed them. Cordero's phone rang. It was the forensics lab. Detective, we've completed the analysis on the DNA from the warehouse. We got a hit on a partial match in a genealogy database. What kind of match? Familial. The DNA we found is related to someone who submitted their profile to one of those ancestry websites. A woman named Patricia Salazar. Cordero felt his pulse quicken. Victor Salazar's relative? His daughter. Which means the DNA at the crime scene likely came from Victor Salazar himself or a close male relative. After ending the call, Cordero stood in the parking lot, pieces falling into place. Victor Salazar had been at the warehouse. His DNA was at the murder scene, and he'd lied about knowing the victims. We need to dig into Salazar's past, he told Park. Everything. If he was involved in this, there has to be evidence somewhere. Already on it. I've got requests in for all his financial records from 1998, phone records, witness statements. But detective, if Salazar killed them, why? He had no direct connection to Marcus and Olivia. No, but he had a connection to Cole Brennan. And Brennan had 200,000 reasons to want Marcus dead. What if Brennan didn't just mention his problems to Salazar over cards? What if he paid him to solve those problems permanently? Back at the station, they found a message waiting from Cole Brennan's attorney. Brennan had left the country 3 days earlier, taking a private jet to Costa Rica. No return date scheduled. Son of a bitch is running, Park said. Or Salazar told him to run. Either way, it makes him look guilty as hell. Cordero grabbed his phone. Get me everything you can on Salazar's organization from the 90s. Who worked for him? Who did his dirty work? Someone helped him kill those kids and bury that car in the desert. Someone who's still around. Someone who might be willing to talk if it means avoiding a murder charge. The investigation was narrowing. After 25 years, the walls were closing in. But Cordero knew that cornered men were dangerous, and Victor Salazar was not the type to go down without a fight. Harper Whitmore couldn't sleep. She lay in her bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind churning through everything Detective Cordero had told her. The warehouse, the DNA evidence. Victor Salazar's name kept appearing, connected to both suspects, present at the scene where her sister had died. At 2 a.m., she gave up on sleep and went to her home office. She'd kept everything related to Olivia's disappearance in boxes in the closet, unable to look at them but unable to throw them away. Now she pulled them out, spreading newspaper clippings and police reports and personal items across her desk. There was Olivia's wedding invitation, the script elegant and hopeful. Photos from the reception, Olivia laughing, Marcus with his arm around her waist. Guest lists, vendor contracts, all the detritus of a celebration that had ended in murder. Harper picked up the guest list, running her finger down the names. She'd looked at this list hundreds of times over the years, wondering if the killer had been there, smiling and drinking champagne while planning what came next. Cole Brennan's name was there, of course. Ryan Hollis wasn't. He hadn't been invited. But there were others, names she'd forgotten, people who'd been on the periphery of Olivia's life. One name jumped out at her, Thomas Salazar. She didn't remember anyone by that name at the wedding, but there it was on the list, with a +1 notation. Salazar. Could it be a coincidence? She grabbed her phone and called Detective Cordero, not caring about the hour. He answered groggily. Ms. Whitmore, what's wrong? The guest list from the wedding. There's a name on it. Thomas Salazar. Is he related to Victor Salazar? She heard rustling, Cordero waking up fully. Spell the first name. Thomas. He had a +1. I don't remember who he was or how he knew Olivia and Marcus. I'm calling Officer Park. Stay on the line. Harper waited, her heart pounding. After a few minutes, Cordero came back. Park's checking the records now. Thomas Salazar is Victor's nephew. He would have been in his early 20s in 1998. Park's pulling his information. Why would Victor Salazar's nephew be invited to Olivia's wedding? That's what we're going to find out. Ms. Whitmore, do you still have the RSVP cards from the wedding? Harper looked through the boxes, finding the small stack of response cards her mother had saved. She flipped through them until she found it. Thomas Salazar, attending with guest, written in neat block letters. I have it. It's here. Don't touch it anymore. I'm sending someone to pick it up. There might be fingerprints or DNA on that card that we can use. After ending the call, Harper continued searching through the boxes. In a folder of wedding correspondence, she found something else. An email printout from Marcus's account, dated 3 weeks before the wedding. It was from someone named Tommy, asking about final numbers for the rehearsal dinner. Marcus had replied, confirming space for 30 people at the restaurant. At the bottom, Tommy had added, looking forward to celebrating with you both. You and Cole have built something special. Harper's breath caught. Tommy had known both Marcus and Cole. He'd been involved in the business somehow. She took a photo of the email and sent it to Cordero. At the police station, Cordero and Park were already pulling up everything they could find on Thomas Salazar. His driver's license photo showed a man now in his late 40s, dark-haired like his uncle, with the same calculating eyes. He works for Victor, Park said, reading from her screen. Has for the last 20 years. Started as a salesman at the dealerships, now he's vice president of operations. But before that, in the late 90s, he worked for DataSync Solutions. Cordero looked up sharply. He worked for Marcus and Cole. According to tax records, yes. He was employed there from 1996 to 1999, right through the time of the murders. So he knew Marcus personally. He was at the wedding, and he had access to the warehouse. Cordero stood. We need to bring him in, now. They found Thomas Salazar at his home in Paradise Valley, a sprawling ranch-style house with a view of Camelback Mountain. He answered the door in a robe, his face showing annoyance at being woken at 4 a.m. Thomas Salazar, I'm Detective Cordero. We need to ask you some questions about Marcus and Olivia Trent. The annoyance on Tommy's face shifted to something more guarded. What about them? You knew them. You attended their wedding. You worked for their company. That was a long time ago. What's this about? We're investigating their murders, and your DNA is related to DNA we found at the crime scene. We need you to come to the station and answer some questions. I'm not going anywhere without my lawyer, and my uncle's lawyer. Your uncle? Why would you need Victor Salazar's lawyer? Tommy's jaw tightened. Because I know how this works. You're trying to pin something on my family, but we had nothing to do with what happened to Marcus and Olivia. Then you won't mind providing a DNA sample to eliminate yourself from our investigation. I'll discuss it with my lawyer. Now get off my property. As they drove back to the station, Park turned to Cordero. He's going to lawyer up and stonewall us. Let him. We have enough for a warrant now. His DNA is related to the crime scene sample. He had access to the warehouse, and he knew the victims. That's probable cause. By dawn, they had the warrant. By noon, Thomas Salazar was sitting in an interrogation room, his lawyer beside him, refusing to answer questions. But Cordero had been a detective long enough to know when someone was scared, and Tommy Salazar was terrified, his hands shaking slightly as he sat rigidly in his chair, his eyes darting to the door every few minutes. Your uncle killed them, didn't he? Cordero said quietly. And you helped. Maybe you didn't want to. Maybe he forced you, but you were there, Tommy. Your DNA is at that warehouse. You can't run from that. My client isn't saying anything without... Cole Brennan is gone, fled to Costa Rica. That leaves you holding the bag for a double murder. Your uncle's DNA is at the scene too. He's going down for this. The only question is whether you go down with him or whether you tell us what really happened, and maybe, just maybe, the prosecutor goes easier on you. Tommy looked at his lawyer, who shook his head. But Tommy's resolve was cracking. Cordero could see it in his eyes, the weight of 25 years of secrets pressing down on him. I want a deal, Tommy said suddenly. Full immunity for testimony. Tommy, don't, his lawyer began. I'm not going to prison for something my uncle did. I was 22 years old. I didn't know what he was planning. I didn't know until it was too late. Cordero leaned forward. Tell me what happened that night. Tommy closed his eyes, and when he spoke, his voice was hollow. Cole came to my uncle, desperate. Marcus was going to file charges against him, ruin him. Cole owed Uncle Victor money too, a lot of money. Uncle Victor said he could make the problem go away, but Cole had to help. Help how? Cole called Marcus the day of the wedding, told him there was an emergency at the warehouse, something about a break-in. Marcus said he'd stop by on the way to the airport, just for a few minutes. He brought Olivia because he didn't want to waste time dropping her off. Parker's pen moved rapidly across her notepad. What happened when they arrived? I was there. Uncle Victor made me come. He said I needed to learn how business was done sometimes. I thought he was just going to scare them, threaten Marcus or something. But when they walked in, Tommy's voice broke. He shot them, just like that. Marcus tried to fight back, protect Olivia, but Uncle Victor shot him first, then her. It was so fast. There was so much blood. The room was silent except for the hum of the recording equipment. Cole was there too, Tommy continued. He was supposed to be in San Diego, but he'd driven back. The three of us wrapped the bodies, put them in the trunk of their car. Uncle Victor had already picked out a spot in the desert, had equipment ready to dig. We buried them that night. Then we cleaned the warehouse. Uncle Victor knew how to hide evidence. He'd done it before. What happened to the gun? Uncle Victor kept it. He has a collection, keeps them locked up in a storage unit. He said it was insurance, in case anyone ever tried to cross him. Cordero stood. Write down the address of that storage unit, and start writing down everything you remember about that night, every detail, because that's the only way you're getting any kind of deal. As Tommy began to write, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold the pen, Cordero stepped out of the interrogation room. Park followed him into the hallway. We have him, she said. We have Victor Salazar. Get a warrant for that storage unit, and put out an APB for Salazar. I don't want him getting on a plane to join Brennan in Costa Rica. But even as he said it, Cordero knew that men like Victor Salazar didn't run. They fought, and they were most dangerous when cornered. Victor Salazar was not at home when the arrest warrant was issued. His wife, an elegantly dressed woman in her 60s, answered the door of their Scottsdale mansion with cool composure and informed Detective Cordero that her husband had left early that morning for a business meeting. She didn't know where or when he'd return. The storage unit address Tommy had provided led them to a facility in Mesa. Rows of climate-controlled units protected by security gates and cameras. The manager, a nervous man in his 30s, unlocked Unit 247 with shaking hands after Cordero presented the warrant. Inside, they found exactly what Tommy had described. A gun collection, meticulously maintained and organized. Handguns, rifles, shotguns, all locked in glass cases. But in one particular case, there was an empty space where a weapon had recently been removed. The dust pattern showed clearly where a small handgun had sat for years. He knew we were coming, Park said, photographing the empty space. Tommy must have warned him. Cordero pulled out his phone and called the station. Put a flag on Victor Salazar's passport, alert Border Patrol, airports, everything, and get me his cell phone records for the last 24 hours. While forensic technicians processed the storage unit, Cordero and Park drove to Victor Salazar's flagship dealership. The showroom was open, salespeople moving among customers, but Salazar's office upstairs was empty. His secretary, the same woman who'd greeted them days before, looked genuinely concerned. Mr. Salazar called in sick this morning, she said. He's never sick. In 15 years, I've never known him to miss a day of work. Did he say where he was? No, just that he wasn't feeling well and would be working from home. But Salazar wasn't at home. His car, a black Mercedes, wasn't in any of its usual locations. His phone went straight to voicemail, and as the hours passed with no sign of him, Cordero began to suspect that Victor Salazar hadn't run from the law. He was planning something else. The call came at 6 p.m. Harper Whitmore's number appeared on Cordero's phone, and when he answered, he immediately heard the fear in her voice. Detective, there's a car parked across the street from my house. It's been there for the past hour. A black Mercedes. I can see someone sitting in the driver's seat, but I can't make out who it is." Cordero was already moving toward his vehicle, Park right behind him. "Harper, listen to me very carefully. Lock all your doors and windows. Get your daughter and go to an interior room, somewhere without windows. Don't come out until I get there." "You think it's him? You think it's Salazar?" "I don't know, but I'm not taking chances. I'm 15 minutes away. Phoenix PD is sending patrol units now. Just stay inside and stay away from windows." Cordero pushed his unmarked car to its limits, racing through Scottsdale streets with lights flashing and siren wailing. Beside him, Park was on the radio, coordinating with patrol units converging on Harper's neighborhood. They arrived to find 2 patrol cars already on scene, but the black Mercedes was gone. The officers had seen it pull away as they approached, heading east at high speed. They'd pursued but lost it in traffic. Cordero ran to Harper's front door. She opened it immediately, her face pale, her daughter Brianna behind her clutching a phone. "Did you see who it was?" Cordero asked. "Not clearly, but Detective, he wanted me to see him. He sat there for an hour, making sure I knew he was watching. This is a message, isn't it? He's telling me he can get to me." Cordero stepped inside, scanning the street through the window. "I'm posting officers here. 24-hour protection until we have Salazar in custody." "Why would he come here? What does he want?" "His nephew gave him up. His whole carefully constructed life is about to come crashing down. Men like Salazar don't accept that gracefully. If he can't escape justice, he'll try to eliminate anyone who can testify against him. Tommy, he'll go after Tommy." Cordero was already on his phone, calling the station. "Get someone to Tommy Salazar's house now. Victor might go after him." But when officers arrived at Tommy's Paradise Valley home, they found him unharmed, sitting in his living room with his lawyer, both men pale and frightened. Tommy had received a text message an hour earlier from an unknown number. Just 2 words: family loyalty. "He's coming for me," Tommy said, his voice shaking. "Uncle Victor doesn't forgive betrayal. I signed my own death warrant when I talked to you." They moved Tommy to a safe house. Unmarked location, armed guards at every entrance. But Cordero knew that wouldn't stop Victor Salazar if he was truly determined. The man had gotten away with murder for 25 years by being smarter and more ruthless than anyone expected. At midnight, Cordero's phone rang again. This time it was the manager of the storage facility where Salazar kept his gun collection. "Detective, I just reviewed the security footage like you asked. Mr. Salazar was here this morning at 5 a.m. He accessed his unit, was inside for about 10 minutes. Can you see what he took? The angle's not great, but he was carrying something when he left. Small, probably a handgun. And Detective, he had something else with him. A large duffel bag, looked heavy. He took that into the unit too, then brought it back out. What was in the bag? I don't know. But whatever it was, he left it inside the unit." Cordero and Park returned to the storage facility, the manager nervously unlocking Unit 247 once again. Inside, sitting on the floor in the center of the space, was a black duffel bag that hadn't been there during their earlier search. Park approached it carefully, unzipping it slowly. Inside were files, documents, photographs, evidence that Victor Salazar had carefully collected and preserved over decades. Photos of the warehouse the night of the murders, showing Cole Brennan and Tommy helping to clean up. Financial records documenting payments Brennan had made to Salazar. Even a ledger detailing other crimes, other problems that Salazar had solved for desperate men over the years. "It's his insurance policy," Park said, flipping through the documents. "Everything he needed to make sure no one ever crossed him." "Or his confession," Cordero said quietly. "He knows we're closing in. He knows Tommy talked. This is him admitting what he did before he disappears. Or before he goes out on his own terms." Cordero's stomach tightened. Men who left confession evidence behind usually had one final play in mind. And Victor Salazar, cornered and facing life in prison, was exactly the type to want to control his own ending. "We need to find him, now, before he does something we can't undo." The breakthrough came at 2 a.m. Victor Salazar's Mercedes was spotted at a rest stop off Interstate 10, heading east toward Tucson. Highway patrol moved to intercept, but by the time they arrived, the car was empty, keys still in the ignition. Cordero stood in the rest stop parking lot, watching forensic technicians process the abandoned vehicle. Inside the Mercedes, they found more evidence. Marcus Trent's wallet, which had been missing for 25 years. Olivia's wedding ring, cleaned and polished. And a handwritten note on expensive stationery. Cordero read it, his jaw tightening. Detective Cordero, by the time you read this, you'll understand that I was never going to prison. I've lived my entire life on my own terms, and I'll die the same way. The evidence in the storage unit will confirm what my nephew told you. I killed Marcus and Olivia Trent. Cole Brennan paid me $100,000 to solve his problem, and I solved it the only way I knew how. I'm not sorry for what I did. In my world, people who can't protect themselves don't survive. Marcus should have been smarter. He should have been more careful about who he trusted. You'll find me where this all began. The desert keeps secrets, but it also demands payment eventually. I'm simply settling my debt. Victor Salazar. Park looked up from her phone. I've got his location. Cell phone pinged a tower near the original burial site. He's gone back there. They drove through the night, a convoy of police vehicles racing toward the desert coordinates where Marcus Trent's car had been found weeks earlier. The excavation site was still marked with yellow tape, the earth scarred from the dig. And there, standing at the edge of the pit where the car had been buried, illuminated by the rising sun, was Victor Salazar. He held a small handgun in his right hand, the same weapon that had killed Olivia and Marcus Trent 25 years ago. Mr. Salazar, Cordero called out, stepping from his vehicle with his hands visible. Put the gun down. Salazar turned to face them, and in the early morning light, Cordero could see that the man looked older than his years, worn down by decades of violence and secrets. I'm not going to prison, detective. I told you that in my note. You don't have to do this. Put the gun down and we can talk. Talk about what? About how I executed 2 kids on their wedding night for money? About how I buried them like trash and went home and slept like a baby? Salazar laughed, a hollow sound. I'm not interested in redemption, detective. I made my choices. I lived well because of those choices, and now I'm going to die because of them. The families deserve justice. They deserve to see you answer for what you did. The families. Salazar's expression hardened. Marcus Trent was weak. Cole came to me because Marcus couldn't handle a simple business problem. In my world, weak men don't survive. I did him a favor, really. He went out quick, cleaner than he deserved. And Olivia, what did she do to deserve being executed? For the first time, something flickered across Salazar's face. Not quite guilt, but perhaps a shadow of it. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time, wrong choice in husbands. Put the gun down, Victor. I don't think so. Salazar raised the weapon, but instead of pointing it at the officers, he pressed it against his own temple. Tell Harper Whitmore I'm sorry her sister died. Tell her it wasn't personal, it was just business. Victor, don't... The gunshot echoed across the desert, birds scattering from nearby brush. Victor Salazar crumpled to the ground, the weapon falling from his hand, his blood seeping into the same earth that had hidden his crimes for a quarter-century. Cordero stood frozen for a moment, then moved forward with Park and the other officers. The desert wind picked up, carrying dust across the scene, as if the land itself was trying to erase this final act of violence. It was over. But as Cordero looked down at Salazar's body, then up at the vast Arizona sky, he felt no sense of victory. Only the hollow ache that came from knowing that justice, when it finally arrived, couldn't undo the damage that had been done. Couldn't bring back the young couple whose only crime had been trusting the wrong people. The sun continued to rise, indifferent to the tragedy playing out below. The desert kept its secrets no longer. But the price of truth had been paid in blood, as it so often was. 3 weeks after Victor Salazar's death, Detective Cordero sat across from Harper Whitmore in her living room, the afternoon sun streaming through the windows. Brianna had made coffee, then retreated to her room to give them privacy. Cole Brennan was arrested in Costa Rica this morning, Cordero said. He's being extradited back to the United States. He'll face charges for conspiracy to commit murder, accessory to murder, and obstruction of justice. Harper's hands wrapped around her coffee mug, though she didn't drink. Will he go to prison? With Tommy Salazar's testimony and the evidence from Victor's storage unit, I'd say it's almost certain. He'll likely spend the rest of his life behind bars. Good. Harper's voice was quiet but firm. He took everything from my sister. Her future, her children she would have had, all the years she should have lived. He should lose everything too. Cordero nodded, understanding the sentiment. There's something else. The medical examiner released your sister and Marcus's remains. You can make funeral arrangements now, if you'd like. Harper closed her eyes, and Cordero saw tears slip down her cheeks. After 25 years, I can finally bury her. I can finally say goodbye. I know this doesn't undo what was done. I know it doesn't bring her back, but at least now you have answers. You know what happened. You know who was responsible. My mother died not knowing. That's the part that breaks my heart. She spent her last years hoping against hope that Olivia was alive somewhere, maybe with amnesia, maybe trapped, but alive. She died with that hope. And now I know the truth, and I can't tell her. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of those lost years hanging between them. There's something I need to ask you, Harper said finally. When you found them, in the trunk of that car, were they together? Were they holding each other? Cordero remembered the crime scene photos, the way the bodies had been positioned. Yes, Marcus's arms were around Olivia. Even in death, he was trying to protect her. Harper sobbed once, a sound of pure grief, then composed herself. That's exactly what he would have done. He loved her so much. They both deserved so much better than what they got. I know, and I'm sorry it took 25 years to find the truth. But you found it. That matters. My sister's not just a missing person anymore. She's not an unsolved mystery. She has her story now, horrible as it is. And the men who killed her faced justice. After leaving Harper's house, Cordero returned to the station. Officer Park was at her desk, finishing the final reports on the case. Cole Brennan's lawyer called, she said. He wants to make a deal. Full cooperation in exchange for taking the death penalty off the table. What does he have to offer that we don't already know? Details about other crimes Victor Salazar committed. Apparently, the Trents weren't the only people Salazar killed for money. Brennan claims to know about at least 3 other murders from the 90s and early 2000s. Cordero sat down heavily. Of course there were others. Men like Salazar don't start with a double execution. They work their way up to it. So, what do we tell the prosecutor? Let Brennan give up what he knows, but he's still doing life without parole. He paid to have 2 innocent people murdered on their wedding night. There's no deal good enough to make up for that. Park nodded, making notes. There's something else. Ryan Hollis called. He wants to attend the funeral, pay his respects. Should I tell him it's not appropriate? Cordero thought for a moment. No. Let Harper decide. It's her choice who gets to mourn her sister. The funeral was held on a Saturday morning at a small church in Phoenix. The same church where Olivia and Marcus had been married 25 years earlier. Harper had chosen this deliberately, a way of honoring the joy they'd felt that day before tragedy struck. The church was full. Family members, old friends, people who'd never stopped wondering what had happened to the bright young couple who'd simply disappeared. Detective Cordero sat in the back, watching as Harper gave the eulogy, her voice strong despite the tears streaming down her face. My sister Olivia was the kindest person I've ever known, Harper said, standing at the pulpit with Brianna beside her. She had this way of making everyone feel special, feel seen. She was going to be an amazing teacher, an amazing mother someday, an amazing wife. Marcus was her perfect match. They were so happy together, so full of plans and dreams. Harper paused, gripping the sides of the pulpit. For 25 years, we didn't know what happened to them. We imagined every scenario, held onto every shred of hope. And when we finally learned the truth, it was worse than we'd feared. They were murdered by greedy, evil men who saw their lives as obstacles to be removed. She looked out at the gathered crowd. But I don't want Olivia and Marcus to be remembered for how they died. I want them remembered for how they lived. With kindness, with love, with hope for the future. They deserved so much more time than they got. We all deserved more time with them. Harper stepped down from the pulpit, and the service continued. Ryan Hollis sat in the very back corner, his face buried in his hands, his shoulders shaking with sobs. Near the front, several of Marcus's old college friends held each other, crying for the friend they'd lost. After the service, as people filed out into the sunshine, Cordero found himself standing next to Harper at the graveside. Two coffins sat side by side, ready to be lowered into the earth. Together in death as they'd been in life. "Thank you, Detective," Harper said quietly, "for not giving up, for finding them, for making sure the people responsible faced justice. I wish I could have done more. I wish I could have found them sooner. You found them when the desert was ready to give them up. My mother used to say that everything happens in its own time. Maybe this was always meant to happen now, when I was strong enough to handle it, when my daughter was old enough to understand." As the coffins were lowered into the ground, Harper threw a white rose onto each one. "I love you, Olivia," she whispered. "I never stopped loving you. Rest now. You're finally safe." Cordero watched as the small crowd dispersed, people returning to their cars, their lives, carrying the weight of this tragedy with them. But Harper remained, standing at the graveside long after everyone else had gone, saying a final goodbye to the sister she'd lost so long ago. The investigation was officially closed the following week. Cole Brennan was arraigned on multiple charges and held without bail. Tommy Salazar received immunity in exchange for his testimony, though he'd lost everything else: his job, his reputation, his relationship with his family. The DataSync Solutions Company was dissolved, its assets frozen pending civil suits from Marcus Trent's estate. Detective Cordero filed his final report and moved on to the next case, as he always did. But he kept a photo on his desk, one that Harper had given him. Olivia and Marcus on their wedding day, radiant with joy, with no idea that they had only hours left to live. It reminded him why he did this work, why he spent his days wading through the worst of human nature, looking for justice in the rubble of shattered lives. Because people like Olivia and Marcus deserved someone to fight for them, to make sure their deaths weren't just forgotten tragedies, but solved cases. Closed files. Justice served, however imperfectly, however late. The desert had given up its secrets at last. The vanished honeymoon had been explained, the missing couple found, the murderers brought to account. But Cordero knew that for Harper Whitmore, the real work was just beginning. The work of healing, of moving forward, of carrying her sister's memory into a future Olivia would never see. Some cases closed with neat endings. Others left scars that would never fully heal. The Trent case was both. Justice had been served, but it came too late to undo the damage. It always did. Cordero turned off his desk lamp and headed home, carrying the weight of another solved case. Another family's tragedy transformed into a closed file. Outside, the Phoenix night was warm and clear, stars visible above the city lights. Somewhere out there, other secrets waited to be uncovered. Other families waited for answers. And he would keep looking, keep digging, keep fighting, because that was what he did. That was what they all deserved. 5 years later, Harper Whitmore stood in a bright classroom at Desert Willow Elementary School, watching her daughter Brianna lead a group of second graders through a reading lesson. Brianna had become a teacher, just like her Aunt Olivia had been. Just like Olivia would have wanted. "You're a natural," Harper told her daughter when the children were dismissed for recess. Brianna smiled, organizing papers on her desk. "I feel like Aunt Olivia is with me when I'm teaching. Like she's guiding my hands, whispering the right words to say to each kid." Harper's eyes filled with tears, but they were good tears. Healing tears. The raw grief that had consumed her for so long had softened into something gentler, a sweet sadness tinged with love and memory. She visited Olivia's grave every month, bringing fresh flowers and sitting in the shade of the oak tree that had grown up beside the headstone. She told her sister about Brianna's teaching career, about the scholarship fund Harper had established in Olivia and Marcus's names, about the small ways their memory continued to touch the world. Detective Cordero had retired 2 years earlier, but he still sent Harper a card every September 19th. Just a few words acknowledging the day, remembering Olivia and Marcus. It meant more to Harper than he probably knew. Someone else remembered. Someone else marked the anniversary not just of their disappearance, but of their lives. Cole Brennan died in prison from a heart attack in his 3rd year of incarceration. Harper felt nothing when she heard the news. Not satisfaction, not anger, just a hollow emptiness. His death didn't change anything, didn't bring Olivia back, didn't undo any of the damage he'd caused. Tommy Salazar had moved away from Arizona, trying to start over somewhere his name wasn't associated with murder. Harper didn't know where he'd gone, and she didn't care. He'd made his choices. He'd have to live with them. The DataSync warehouse had been torn down, the land sold to a developer who built condominiums on the site. Harper drove past it sometimes, looking up at the modern buildings and thinking about the blood that had soaked into the ground there. The new residents would never know what had happened on that spot. Maybe that was better. Maybe some stories didn't need to be carried forward, but Olivia's story would be carried forward. In the 2nd grade classroom where her niece taught, in the scholarship that sent underprivileged kids to college every year, in the way Harper tried to live with kindness and grace, honoring the sister who'd embodied those qualities. The desert had taken Olivia from her, but it had also given her back, had provided answers when all hope seemed lost. And in those answers, painful as they were, Harper had found a strange kind of peace. She knew now what had happened, knew that Olivia hadn't suffered long, knew that Marcus had held her at the end, protecting her even as their lives were stolen, knew that the men responsible had faced justice one way or another. It wasn't the ending Harper would have chosen. It wasn't the happily ever after that Olivia and Marcus deserved. But it was an ending nonetheless, a closing of the circle, a laying to rest of questions that had haunted her for a quarter century. On the evening of what would have been Olivia's 48th birthday, Harper gathered her family together. Brianna and her new fiancé, Harper's brother who'd flown in from Seattle, a handful of cousins and old friends. They sat in Harper's backyard as the sun set over the desert, sharing stories about Olivia and Marcus. They laughed at memories of Olivia's terrible cooking, how she'd once set off the fire alarm making spaghetti. They cried, remembering Marcus's bad jokes and his infectious laugh. They toasted to the life that Olivia and Marcus should have had, and to the legacy they'd left behind, despite their short time on Earth. "To Olivia," Harper said, raising her glass to the desert sky, where stars were beginning to appear. "You were taken from us too soon, but you're never forgotten. You live on in every student Brianna teaches, in every kid who goes to college on your scholarship, in every act of kindness we perform in your memory. You're still here, sis. You'll always be here." As the night deepened and the gathering slowly dispersed, Harper remained outside, looking up at the stars. She thought about fate and choice, about the random cruelty of the universe and the persistence of love in the face of tragedy. She thought about the young woman she'd been, 19 years old, watching her sister drive away on her wedding night and never seeing her again, about the years of searching and hoping and grieving, about the moment Detective Cordero had called to say they'd found the car, about learning the truth, horrible as it was. And she thought about this moment, right now, 5 years after Olivia had been laid to rest. How the sharp edges of grief had worn smooth with time. How she could remember her sister without breaking apart. How love persisted even when everything else was lost. The desert wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the faint smell of creosote and sage. Harper closed her eyes and listened. and in the sound of the wind, she could almost hear her sister's voice, almost hear her laughter, almost feel her presence, warm and loving and eternal. Some stories ended in tragedy. Some questions were answered too late to do any good. But love, Harper had learned, outlasted everything. Outlasted death and grief and the cruelty of evil men. Outlasted time itself. Olivia was gone, but she was also still here. In memories and legacy, in the lives she'd touched and the love she'd given. The desert had kept her secret for 25 years, but it couldn't keep her love hidden. That burned eternal, bright as the desert sun, warm as the Arizona night. Harper opened her eyes and smiled through her tears, looking up at the infinite stars. "Good night, Olivia," she whispered. "I'll see you again someday. Until then, I'll keep living for both of us. I'll keep remembering. I'll keep loving. That's my promise to you." The stars shone down, brilliant and constant, bearing witness to one woman's grief and one woman's healing. The vanished honeymoon had ended in tragedy, but the story didn't end there. It continued in the people who remembered, who honored, who loved despite the pain. And in that continuation, there was something like redemption, something like hope, something like peace. The desert wind sighed one last time, then fell still. The night was quiet, and Harper Whitmore, sister of the vanished bride, guardian of her memory, stood beneath the stars and felt, for the first time in 25 years, something very close to whole.